You won't believe how Madame Cash made her money. If you want to see how she built her wealth, watch the story to the very end. People in the crowded streets whispered her name with a mixture of envy and fear. Some admired her towering mansion, her fleet of cars, the way she stepped out in silk and gold like royalty. Others lowered their voices when she passed, clutching their children a little tighter, as though her shadow alone could steal something precious. Madame Cash did not always live this life. Once she was just Amaka, a struggling young woman with dreams too big for the small suffocating room she rented. Hunger was her closest companion. She knew the sound of an empty stomach better than laughter. She knew rejection better than kindness. Life hardened her early. When her mother died, there was no inheritance, no safety net, only death and a cruel landlord who reminded her daily that sympathy did not pay rent. Amaka tried everything, selling food by the roadside, working long hours as a cleaner, even begging distant relatives for help. Nothing lasted, nothing was enough. Until the day everything changed. It began quietly, almost harmlessly. A nurse at a small, poorly funded clinic approached her. The woman was older, with tired eyes that seemed to have seen too much. "You look like someone who needs money," the nurse said. Amaka laughed bitterly. "Who doesn't?" The nurse leaned closer. "What if I told you there's a way to make real money? Fast." Amaka hesitated. Something about the woman's tone made her uneasy, but desperation as a way of silencing caution. "What kind of work?" she asked. The nurse smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "You just have to help connect people." That was how it started. At first, Amaka told herself she was doing something good. There were couples, wealthy, desperate, unable to have children. They were willing to pay anything. Then there were young women, poor, scared, sometimes abandoned, who gave birth in secret and didn't want their babies. Amaka became the middle person. She arranged adoptions, no paperwork, no questions, just money exchanged in quiet rooms. The first time she held a newborn meant for sale, her hands trembled. The baby was small, fragile, barely aware of the world it had entered. "This is wrong," a voice inside her whispered. But then she saw the money, more than she had ever held in her life. That voice grew quieter. With each transaction, it became easier. Amaka changed her name to Madame Cash, a title people gave her as her wealth grew. She embraced it, wore it like a crown. She moved out of her cramped room into a duplex, then into a mansion. Her clothes became expensive, her voice confident, her heart distant. She stopped seeing babies as children. They became products. Demand grew quickly. Wealthy clients preferred her services because she delivered quickly and discreetly. No waiting lists, no legal complications, just results. And Madame Cash always delivered. But as her business expanded, the line between desperation and cruelty blurred. It was no longer just about unwanted babies. It became about supply. One night, the nurse who first introduced her to the trade came with troubling news. "We need more babies," she said. "The clients are increasing." Madame Cash frowned. "Then find more mothers." It's not that simple anymore. That was the moment everything changed. Instead of waiting for desperate women, Madame Cash began creating desperation. She funded small maternity homes in hidden areas, places where young, vulnerable women were taken in under the promise of care and support. Many of them didn't fully understand what they were getting into. Some were tricked, some were forced, and once they gave birth, their babies were taken. Sometimes without consent, sometimes under pressure, sometimes through lies. "You can't take care of this child," they would say. "Let us help you." And Madame Cash counted her money. A mansion became a symbol of success. Parties were held there, lavish, extravagant gatherings where influential people laughed and drank, unaware or unwilling to question the source of her wealth. But not everyone was blind. Rumors spread. A journalist named Tundi began investigating. He had heard whispers, stories of missing babies, grieving mothers, secret payments. At first, it sounded like conspiracy, but the deeper he dug, the more the pieces began to fit. He visited one of the maternity homes. What he saw disturbed him. Young women sat in silence, their eyes empty. Some clutched their stomachs, others stared at the walls as if they had lost something they could never recover. "Where are the babies?" he asked one of the attendants. "They've been adopted," she replied quickly. "Adopted or sold?" She didn't answer. That silence told him everything. Meanwhile, Madame Cash grew bolder. She believed she was untouchable. "Money is power," she often said, "and I have more than enough." But karma does not announce its arrival. It comes quietly, unexpectedly, and when it does not knock. Madame Cash had a daughter, her only child, Ada. Unlike her mother, Ada was kind-hearted. She had been raised in luxury, shielded from the harsh truths of the world and from the truth about her mother's business. Or so Madame Cash thought. One evening, Ada overheard a conversation. Two of her mother's associates were talking carelessly. "Another baby delivered yesterday," one said. "The client paid double," the other replied. "Madame Cash is unstoppable." Ada froze. Baby delivered. Something felt wrong. That night, she searched her mother's office. What she found shattered her world. Documents, payments, records of transactions, each one tied to a child. Her hand shook as she flipped through the files. "This can't be real," she whispered. But it was. Her mother was not just a businesswoman. She was a trafficker. Ada confronted her the next morning. "Tell me it's not true," she demanded, her voice breaking. "Tell me you didn't sell those babies." Madame Cash sighed, as if annoyed by the question. "You don't understand," she said calmly. "I help people. I give children better lives." "You steal them," Ada shouted. "I save them from poverty." "You profit from their pain." The room fell silent. For the first time, Madame Cash saw something in her daughter's eyes she had never seen before. Disgust. That look unsettled her more than she cared to admit. "You'll understand one day," she said coldly. "No," Ada replied. "I won't." From that moment, everything began to unravel. Ada could not stay silent. She contacted Tunde, the journalist who had been investigating the case. Together, they gathered evidence, documents, testimonies, hidden recordings, and then they exposed everything. The story exploded. News outlets carried it everywhere. People were outraged. Mothers came forward with their stories. Stories of loss, deception, and heartbreak. Madame Cash's empire crumbled overnight. Her accounts were frozen. Her associates disappeared. And then came the arrest. As the police led her away from her mansion, the same people who once admired her now watched in silence. Some shook their heads, others whispered, "Karma." In prison, Madame Cash finally had time to think. No luxury, no power, just silence and regret. But the deepest wound came later. Months into her sentence, a shocking truth surfaced. One of the babies she had sold years ago was her own. Before Ada was born, Madame Cash had secretly given birth to another child during her struggling days. A child she believed she could not care for. Desperate for money, she had allowed the nurse to handle it. She never asked questions. She never looked back. Until now. The realization hit her like a storm. All those years, all those babies, and one of them was hers. Somewhere out there, a child was living a life she would never be part of, or perhaps suffering the consequences of a system she had helped create. For the first time, Madame Cash cried, not for her lost wealth, not for her ruined reputation, but for the child she had lost, and for all the lives she had broken. Karma had not just caught up with her, It had come full circle, and this time there was no escape.